Well, good morning, West Portal. We are a little bit compressed for time, so if I look like I'm skipping over sections in our presentation, whatever, it's just we're going to have to be a little picky and choosy. For those of you that maybe haven't been with us over the last few weeks, we are taking 3 Sundays here, walking through the little-known and seldom-read Old Testament book of Habakkuk. Now, just as a way of kind of catching us up, because today is the last Sunday, Habakkuk is only 3 chapters long, and we come to the last chapter, chapter 3 today. We opened our new year here with a series on prayer, apprenticing in the way of Jesus and practicing the way of Jesus, specifically through prayer. And we didn't have time to really get into this kind of a question during that series, but what I wanted to just table at the outset is some of Jesus' most audacious promises come in the area of prayer. Ask and it will be given, seek and you will find, knock on the door. If you, though you as imperfect and broken as human beings as you are, know how to give good gifts to your kids, how much more will your good Father in heaven, know how to give good gifts to you? Or if we were looking at one of Jesus' really intimate conversations with his disciples in John chapter 14, he essentially just says, listen, anything you ask in my name, you have. And while most of us can think back on hopefully to a handful of really profound kind of God moments or answered prayer stories in our lives, for many of us, while Jesus' most audacious promises may come in the area of prayer, some of our greatest life disappointments come in the area of prayer. And those disappointments tend to come in one of 2 forms. A, it feels like God isn't hearing our complaint, or he's really slow to do something about it. Right? Your prayer sometimes feels like it bounces off of the floorboards of heaven. God, why aren't you doing something about, and we can name and talk about any kind of circumstance that's causing us anxiety or pain in our life, etc. Now, just to retrace, this is Habakkuk's opening complaint in chapter 1. God, the world, how can you be good given the injustice and the violence and oppression that I see all around me? Why don't you do something about this? Now, the good news for Habakkuk is God shows up and says, don't worry, I've got your back. I'm about to do something about this. The bad news is the way God says he's going to address this issue is that the world empire of that time, the Babylonians, are going to come and conquer the southern kingdom of Judah. Don't worry. It's one of these great things. These are our disappointments. The God who seems like he doesn't do anything, or B, the God who shows up with news that is not what we thought we were praying for. If Habakkuk had known this was going to be God's answer, I'm convinced he would not have been praying in the first place. I'm sorry I asked. And what I want you to just understand, this is one of the things I love about this book. I just think it's gritty. I think it's real. I think there's more to this that you and I can relate to than we would sometimes care to admit. And Habakkuk doesn't give you easy answers. But chapter 3 is him wrestling with this hard word that he has heard from God. And he's trying to make sense of this, and he is processing this. And what you're going to see in the pieces that we'll look at, and I won't do a line-by-line walkthrough, but even just in the broad sections, the outcome of whether he's going to accept this is going to remain in the balance until the very end of this. And he's wrestling to process this. And Habakkuk, bless his heart, and you shouldn't miss this, writes a song. Chapter 3 is a song. And I would love to make this point more fully, and I'm not going to. What I will simply say is, if you look even just at the last line, if you have your Bibles, by the way, this is a really wonderful space for this, but the very last line in this chapter is, for the director of music, on my stringed instruments. It's one of my favorite little takeaways of this piece. We don't know this with certainty, but it has left many wondering if Habakkuk, in addition to being a prophetic voice in the community, also was a temple musician, somebody who led the people in music and in worship. And as a songwriter, songs tend to be born out of the highs and the lows and the aches in life. And so this would be a natural way for a musician to process a hard word from the Lord. It's fascinating to think that it might be the community that also learned and sang this as a way of giving voice to this kind of a concern. Can you jump ahead to the slide where I just have the structure outlined? And the reason I want to suggest something here, again, if you have your Bibles open, one of the words you'll see in the right-hand margin is Selah. and it's the meaning of which has been largely lost to the sands of time. But most scholars believe it's a musical reference and that it just identifies where the song breaks would naturally be. And the book I was reading this week was just suggesting it's likely identifying the heading or the title of three different call them sections, but if we were putting this in contemporary song form, we would call it verse 1, verse 2, and verse 3. And so verse 2, there we go. Verse 2 opens the song and functions much like a chorus in that it captures in really concise form the themes that the rest of the chapter is going to try to flesh out and wrestle with. And so if I just structured this, like when you and I finish singing the verse of a song, we loop back and we sing the chorus again. And so it intrigues me to wonder if that's the way this played out. We sang the chorus first in the song 10,000 Reasons this morning. Bless the Lord, O my soul. Then we sing the verse, we loop back to the chorus. We sing verse 2, we loop back to the chorus. And I'll talk a bit about the bridge, which usually introduces a new idea into the lyric and into the content. But I'm going to talk about this passage in these kind of sections. I'm going to refer to verse 1, but I'm not literally talking about Habakkuk 3, verse 1. I'm talking about the section of verses that would be verse 1 in the song. Does that make sense? And we'll just make some simple observations as we walk through this. So, yeah, let's fire up our first verse. So here's the chorus of the song. Lord, I have heard of your fame. I stand in awe of your deeds, Lord. Repeat them in our day. In our time, make them known. In wrath, remember mercy. So this becomes the chorus of the song. Lord, I have heard of your fame would be a way of inviting the community to recall and recollect the different ways that God had acted powerfully in their backstory, in their history, to deliver, to provide, and to protect. And as the nation would think about these different stories, and much of your Old Testament would cover this kind of a background, he says, renew them in our day, and the Hebrew is literally, let them live. It is an invitation for God to act this way again. By which I just want to say, the chorus is a beautiful, subtle form of protest against the news that Habakkuk has. God has given him hard news of a nation that's coming. He's not super thrilled about this, and as he writes his song, he starts with, but God, I can remember all of these ways you have acted to powerfully protect and deliver your people. And I'm asking, do this again. In my time and in your way, let them live. Let's keep going. So here's what, the first section would essentially be verse 1 of this song. God came from Teman, the Holy One from Mount Paran. His glory covered the heavens, and his praise filled the earth. His splendor was like the sunrise. Rays flashed from his hand where his power was hidden. Plague went before him. Pestilence followed in his steps. He stood and shook the earth. He looked and made the nations tremble. The ancient mountains crumbled and the age-old hills collapsed, but he marches on forever. I saw the tents of Cushan in distress, the dwellings of Midian in anguish. Were you angry with the rivers, Lord? Was your wrath against the streams? Did you rage against the sea when you rode your horses and your chariots to victory? Short form. The opening locations that are listed may not mean anything to you, but they would have to Habakkuk's audience. These are locations that are reminiscent of where the Israelite people camped shortly after God delivered and rescued them from the Egyptian army through the Red Sea. It's the location of Mount Sinai, is where God's law and commandments were given for the first time. It's where he began to form this group of people from essentially a group of slaves for centuries into a nation. And so you can hear echoes of the Exodus story littered throughout this. Plagues, pestilence, waters, and so on. And in really poetic and graphic imagery, Habakkuk just calls to mind the way that God has used the forces of nature, fire, cloud, sea, darkness, as both providing and delivering his people in the past. And that's maybe enough about this. We move on to verse 2 of the song. You have my text for me? There we go. You uncovered your bow. You called for many arrows. You split the earth with rivers, the mountains saw you and writhed, torrents of water swept by, the deep roared and lifted its waves high. Sun and moon stood still in the heavens at the glint of your flying arrows, at the lightning of your flashing spear. In wrath you strode through the earth, and in anger you threshed the nations. You came out to deliver your people and to save your anointed one. Most authors I was reading don't think that Habakkuk has any one event in mind. It just continues to be as a poetic and graphic display of God's power that has worked in the past to come to the defense of the Israelite people. In this way, just to give you a comparison, I found myself thinking, so verse 2 doesn't seem like it adds anything to the first verse. And I thought of, if you're familiar with the classic hymn, How Great Thou Art, there's a reason why I usually skip the second verse, because I find it redundant. Verse 1 is God's power in creation. Verse 2 is God's power in creation. Verse 3 is Jesus and the cross, and verse 4 is the hope of heaven. And so I'm always like, why do we need to sing verse 2? We covered that ground already. But here's, I know some of you are like, it's okay, I'll repent later. There's actually a great comparison between both of these songs, Habakkuk 3 and How Great Thou Art. So How Great Thou Art starts, verse 1, is more cosmic in scope. O Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds, I see the sun, the moon, the stars, it's cosmic in scope. But verse 2, while it's still about God's power in creation, brings the focus a little bit more personal. Now it's about what God has done in and around the earth. When through the woods and forest glades, I see birds, I hear the brook, all of these things. Habakkuk does something similar. And so without going into great detail, what I just want to say is, or draw your attention to is this. In that opening section, what I called verse 1 of his song, he speaks in cosmic terms of God's power as the creator. And he uses the pronoun, he uses it in the third person. He, him, his. But in this section, the pronoun changes to the much more personal second person. Now he refers to God as you did this. And I feel like there's something similar in that the God, the all-powerful creator, who we would rightly understand stands somehow beyond and outside and detached and even aloof from his creation, is also the creator who gets up close and personal and is much more approachable than you and I tend to think. And in this way, there's, I think, a wonderful complementary piece between these two little sections, even if the imagery maintains a very similar storyline. There's an echo in here. I don't have time to talk about it. So let's keep going. You crushed the leader of the land of wickedness. You stripped him from head to foot. With his own spear, you pierced his head when his warriors stormed out to scatter us, gloating as though about to devour the wretched who were in hiding. You trampled the sea with your horses, churning the great waters. There are two schools of thought, by the way, if this is the third verse of the song. One is that this is just another poetic way of speaking of the Exodus and of the Pharaoh, the head of the Egyptian army, and God's victory over them through the waters of the Red Sea. I'll just share, there's a second line of thought to this, and if this is true, then it adds a complementary piece. And the thought is that Habakkuk may be borrowing here on the ancient tradition of personifying evil. And throughout, you'll see this in aspects throughout your Old Testament, where chaos and evil is spoken of as the waters of chaos, the sea that rages and roars. And you'll find sometimes a multi-headed sea monster used as a personification of evil. Psalm 74, this monster is called Leviathan. And if you wanted to look it up, Psalm 89 and Isaiah 51 refer to it as Rahab. It's odd for us, and it's a weird way, like we wouldn't tell a story this way. But if this is the case, Habakkuk is speaking in more general terms here about the problem of evil in the world. And if I was going to try to just make a point with a comparison, I would say this becomes a very Old Testament-y, poetic way of praying, may your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, here's why I say this. You and I know that we can pray that line of the Lord's Prayer into very specific contexts. We can say, may your kingdom come, may your will be done in my family, in this health crisis, in our church, in our city. But you and I understand there's something in this line that also aches for one day when God's kingdom will come and his will be done fully and finally. That chaos and evil and injustice is finally done away with. And the thought is that this might be part of Habakkuk's heart in using this language here, that there is an ache that asks for God to move and act beyond just his immediate circumstances, But finally and fully, God, I wish that you would do something about evil in this world so that nation doesn't give way to nation, doesn't give way to nation, that continue to live in opposition to your will and your way. Now, this brings us to the bridge, what I've called the bridge of the song. Let's read it, and then I'll make a few comments about this. So, I heard and my heart pounded. My lips quivered at the sound, and decay crept into my bones. My legs trembled. Yet I will wait patiently for the day of calamity to come on the nation invading us. Though the tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer. He enables me to tread on the heights. And that's where you see for the director of music. In contemporary music, the bridge often changes, rhythm changes, sometimes the melody changes, but most specifically, the lyric usually looks to add something that hasn't been said yet in the song, but that the song is implicitly asking. And just to give you an example of this, one of the contemporary songs we sometimes sing is called Waymaker. If you're familiar with the song, verse after verse, just outlines how God is at work. You are here moving in our midst, touching hearts, changing lives, mending hearts, etc. And implicitly, there's a question left hanging kind of in the back of your mind that says, but what about when I'm here and it doesn't feel like that? And so the bridge introduces that aspect into the lyric. And it says, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You are the, if I was borrowing like a dandruff shampoo slogan, you're the never not working God. It sounds irreverent, but it's a good line. You are the never not working God. It introduces something new into the song. Habakkuk does something here too. And I want to suggest the arc of this song as he's processing this hard news. And don't mistake this. God has said not only is Babylon going to come and sack Jerusalem, it's going to result in 70 years of exile for the people. Okay? A generation is going to grow up, and all they will know is exile. And Habakkuk, as he wrestles with this, is, but God, I can think of all these ways that you have acted powerfully to intervene on behalf of your people. And my prayer is that you would do this again in our day. But implicit and in the back of your head is the question, what if God's answer is no? And this is where Habakkuk comes face to face. And you can feel his hands open up as he accepts, if God says no, he will choose to be okay with it. And you can feel his acceptance as both his fear takes root, and yet there's a quiet resolve of faith that weaves its way through this. If you've, and some of you have walked through this recently, so I don't say this tritely, but if you've ever received really hard news, like a cancer diagnosis, the announcement of a sudden death of a loved one, you know the kind of physical trauma that your body can suddenly have, like your legs give out underneath you and so on. Habakkuk articulates like this layer of physical trauma as he comes to terms with the news that God has given him. His heart pounds, his legs tremble, his lips quiver. It's as if decay crept into his bones. There's a physical reaction to this hard news. And he understands things are going to get awful, and recession is not a big enough word to describe what's coming, as he lists just about every form of agricultural commerce that would be common in the ancient world, from olive groves to fig trees to grapevines, produce of the fields, cattle, sheep, etc. Things are going to be bad, but woven in and through this is this wonderful, quiet, resolute faith. Yeah, yet I will rejoice in God my Savior. It's reminiscent of some of the Psalms, except in the Psalms when we rejoice in God, it's usually because of his blessing and because of his provision and protection. Habakkuk says, even if I don't have your blessing, or it doesn't seem like you will provide and protect, I'm going to choose to rejoice anyway. And the last verse is one that I think is sometimes cherry-picked out of this chapter and just makes it one of those pet peeve verses for me. But it's a beautiful verse, just in context it means something different. The sovereign Lord is my strength. He makes my feet like the feet of a deer and enables me to go on the heights. And if you cherry-pick that verse and you put it on your coffee cup as a pick-me-up in the morning, it tends to be, we interpret this as, the equivalent of climb every mountain. Like I can overcome any obstacle in my path because of God's strength. But in the context of the book of Habakkuk, that verse is saying, with God's strength, I can endure any adversity and suffering. And it's not less powerful, but it's a different kind of an emphasis. Let's keep going. Let's go application here. Short form again. These are talking points. In and of themselves, they're not an application, but I'm hoping that I took a safe motorcycle riding course. This was years ago, and they used to say there are only two types of riders, those who have had an accident and those who are going to. When it comes to adversity and challenge in your life, I think there are, I would maybe say three, but there's those of you who have experienced tremendous adversity, those of you who are experiencing adversity, and those of you who will, at some point, experience suffering and adversity. This is something that will touch all of our lives. So a few comments about fear, frustration, and faith. I think sometimes when it comes to a picture of godly faith, you and I tend to think that this should look like a quick and obvious surrender and acceptance of whatever God has said. I would point to the example of Mary, the mother of Jesus. We were looking at this back in December. The angel comes, it's like, I know you're not married, you're going to be pregnant. No, your fiance won't be the husband. Yeah, things are probably going to get really awkward. You'll be really misunderstood. This will dog you for the rest of your life, maybe worse, but it'll be the Son of God. It's good news. And Mary has this, I am the Lord's servant, let it be to me as you have said. And we go, that's godly faith. And it is. The other example I can think of that's on the other spectrum is this fearless bravado. And I think of David as however young adult he is, and he encounters the Philistine giant Goliath taunting the Israelite army and the Israelite people. And he's like, who are you to say that about my God? Like, give me a few stones and a sling and you're going down. And we go, that's godly faith, this fearless bravado that just storms into the face of whatever with confidence. And both of these are great examples, but it's not Habakkuk's faith. And I want to suggest to you, but Habakkuk's faith is no less real, and it's no less grounded, and it's no less resolute, but it's not quick like Mary's. Habakkuk needs to wrestle with God to get there. In fact, Habakkuk's prayer is essentially, God, is there any other way that we could go about this? I really don't like the idea that you've put forward here. Plan B, I'll vote for it right now. And it actually is reminiscent of Jesus' prayer in the garden, if you think about it. Father, if there's any way, this is not the path I'm hoping for. But then there's still that acceptance, not my will, but yours. Habakkuk's faith doesn't come with fearlessness at the end. It comes with quivering lip, trembling legs, a pounding heart. And he's like, I just hope you can give me the strength to endure what I know is coming. There's no bravado in this. But it's no less a response of faith. And I simply share that to give you permission for those of you that need to wrestle with life chapters that you're walking, or what it feels like you sense God is saying, where it's not good news or it's not the news you want to hear. That God can handle your wrestling. He can handle your lament. In fact, faith is best hammered out and processed in relationship with God. Point number 2, what I just called the necessity of godly hindsight. If you took Habakkuk's response out of context, we just jumped to the end of Habakkuk 3, what he has feels like an irrationally and blind faith. God, even if there is no evidence of your blessing, your provision, or protection, yet I will trust you. But it's not blind and irrational. It's been wrestled with. And what gives Habakkuk the ability to say this is he looks back. And he goes, God, I can think of all the ways you have acted powerfully to intervene and to act on behalf of our people. And as I think about all those ways that you have acted, and I get a sense of the kind of God that you are, I can choose to trust you, even if my present circumstances aren't going to be that powerfully played out. And if I could put this in contemporary terms, I would say most of us wrestle with the question, does God love me? The question is, how much of our life counts as evidence that we get an answer from? Because if all we count is the last day or the last week or sometimes the last years, the answer we come up with is no. You have an entire generation of Israelites is about to grow up in exile, and they come out of that with exactly these questions, really disillusioned about God. Is this God powerful? Does he love us? Does he care? I'm not so sure. How far back are you willing to look? And here's where I want to say Habakkuk doesn't have the benefit of the cross and the empty tomb. He doesn't have the benefit of a story of a creator God who entered human time and space to suffer unimaginably on behalf of his human creation to pay a sin debt that you and I owed. And part of me wants to say there's a reason why we gather on this day of the week in the morning. It's why we open God's word. It's why we come together and we worship and we sing. Every Sunday in part reminds us of a bigger story of who this God is. Does God love me? Based on my immediate circumstances, the answer would sometimes be I'm not so sure. In light of the cross and the empty tomb, we arrive at a different answer. I'm not trying to be trite. I'm just asking, how far back are you willing to look? By the way, if I was going to give you just a fun aside exercise, we come together to open up and retell stories of God's work in and throughout the scriptural story that we have. We could talk about church history. But I suspect if you sat down as families, most of you could identify a handful of God moment stories, answered prayers, open doors, provision that he offered. Most of you would have stories in your family of where you go, this was God showing up. Be a wonderful exercise, because I don't think we're a good storytelling culture, to sit down this week and just actually, so what are those stories? And if you really wanted to do something good, I would say in the next couple weeks, you should actually write them out, even in like Reader's Digest condensed form. Every family should have a small book. This is where God showed up in our story. It would make this so much more personal, and I think it'd be an awesome exercise. Yeah, this too from the hand of God. I was thinking of the story of Job. Calamity after calamity after tragedy, through no fault of his own. And his wife, you have to kind of love her, is just so honest. It's like, why don't you just curse God and be done with it? Like, if this is a good God, there isn't one. And if there is a God, he's monstrous. Can't you see what you're experiencing here? And Job has this just unbelievable response of faith that just says, man, we accept blessings from God's hand. Who are we to turn away if it happens to be adversity? And it's just this quiet resolve. I think what I like about the book of Habakkuk and his story is this. You and I don't know what his response is going to be till the tail end of the book. I think it hangs in the balance, and I think it could go either way. And I think you and I don't know what our response is going to be until those particular moments in life hit us. I don't think anybody fully knows in advance. I'll close with one story. In the early 2000s, here at West Portal, we planted two churches. Our first church that we planted was Living Hope, was on the north side of the city, and the pastor we hired for that was Dwayne Harms. Some of you will remember this. And Dwayne spent about 2 years on staff alongside us. It was part of how we got to know him and kind of built a core group that we sent as part of the launch. I think we launched with about 80 to 100 people that we blessed him with. Be that as it may, shortly after we planted that church, Dwayne was diagnosed with cancer. Despite having a young family, cancer isn't fair. I remember we had a service here as a West Portal family, and Dwayne was here, and I think we were just processing the ache and this news together. If memory serves, we prayed for him in that service, and it was very reminiscent of Habakkuk 3, verse 2. God, we can think of all the ways that you have worked powerfully in the past. You are the author and the giver of life. We know you are the great physician. If you want to heal this man, you have the power and the capability to do it. And we ask that you would let those deeds live in our day. In Jesus' name, amen. But what if God's answer is no? I was leading worship that week, and we closed the service with the song we'll sing in a moment. It's Matt Redman's song, Blessed Be Your Name. It's a great lyric that just kind of captures Habakkuk 3. I remember getting up on stage to lead that song, and I'm thinking, it is so fiercely unfair to sing this kind of lyric and ask somebody to sing this when this is the diagnosis they're processing. And I don't know if he could bring himself to sing it. If memory serves, I don't think he did, but sometimes it's healthy for you and I to just be somewhere where the community gives voice to what we can't bring ourselves to say. But I was up here and I was leading, and he was sitting right there. I'm trying not to stare, but of course, out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching him. Like, what? And you could see the physical anguish as he's processing and wrestling with what he knows is the health diagnosis, as well as the lyric of this song. It was that moment between Habakkuk 15 and 3:15 and 3:16, whereas this, but what if God's answer is no? And you could see physically on him that waffling back and forth. And if memory serves, we got to the chorus, the bridge, of the song. You give and you take away. You give and you take away. It's the words of Job's story, right? But my heart will choose to say. And out of the corner of my eye, I watched him bow his head, and I watched him turn both his hands up. And you could physically see the transition that said, even if you say no, I'll be okay with that. It's the closest I've ever come to watching a Habakkuk 3 moment play out visually in front of me. And he died a few months later. And I don't share this with you to discourage you. I simply share this to say whether you have experienced heartache and suffering, whether you are in the midst of a chapter like that, or whether one is on the horizon at some point, I hope you remember the little-known and seldom-read book of Habakkuk. There is something gritty and real about the way this guy processes. And I want to just affirm once again that fear and struggle, or even fear and frustration, is not the opposite of godly faith. Those can be woven together in really healthy ways. And I think it's so important when we find ourselves in those places that we give ourselves the gift of godly hindsight, that we look far enough back to be reminded of who this God is, and we choose to walk these hard chapters alongside other people that encourage and strengthen and care and support us in the midst of this. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your presence that walks all of life's roads with us. No, not always the roads we would pick and choose, not always the roads we want to walk. We are on the cusp of the Easter season, and we say thank you for your story that has been written powerfully in and through suffering. In fact, your greatest victory on our behalf and the greatest visual demonstration of your love for this world was through what looked like apparent defeat, through an agonizing death. And so, Father, I ask that you would bring beauty into those places where there is brokenness in our hearts and lives. May we feel and sense your comfort and peace, your presence in the midst of what we wish we weren't having to experience. And may these places be an opportunity for our faith to be formed more fully, and somehow for your story to be told more powerfully in and through our lives. These aren't easy life chapters. They're excruciating. And so thank you for the gift of faith family that allows us not to have to walk these alone. Give us the grace to do that well with people in our midst who we know are aching and hurting. All this we pray in the name of Jesus.